Nā pēr, ko tāi mai a Te Pauri, ka are tūne te mahi a te ika, a reira kia tīmatai tā tātou huinga. Te māku noa tukuna atu te reo wairua. So, for Te Pauri in the house, the tail of the fish is working. We might as well get on with business. So, I'll start quickly. A reira, he korore ki te rongorawa, he maungorongo ki te whenua, he whakaaro pai ki ngā tangata kata. E pā ana anō pononga turupi nei ki a koe, ke tau mai ai, ia mātou tō wairua, he hāpai tia tā mātou haerenga. Tātou anō e mihi atu ki a koe, e pā ke tau atu ki a mātou whanaunga te korowai. Te hauora me te korowai, a te hiringa te wairua ki hoki a rāta ki te tātou tā, ki koe ka inga waiwai tāpua mātou tūpuna. Pene mātou ake tunu ake, āmeni. Runga tēnei whakaaro, kia ora mai tātou. Thank you, members, for attending this morning. And without further ado, we'll move through the agenda as has been well provided to us by staff. The first thing is that there are no apologies to be recorded. There are a recording though for public record. And we won't bother with the key health and safety points because everybody here is familiar with those already. So the only one we're waiting for is Deanne, who is attending online soon. Other than that, all the members are here.
So we're recording, but we're not broadcasting.
We're not live streaming.
No. Yep.
Recorded for uploading later to the website.
Yep.
Okay. Can we then move to item 3, any declarations of the conflicts of interest for start? Well, otherwise, we'll make declarations item by item as we move through the agenda. Very good. Item 4.1. The confirmation of the Audit and Risk Finance Committee meeting.
Happy to move, Mr. Chairman.
Second. Thank you, Mr. Kroll. Thank you, Councillor Carr. Anybody would like to make any amendments to those minutes as provided before we vote to accept them? No? All those in favour then of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Any votes against? Any abstentions? Thank you. The minutes are approved. Could move then to the action sheet, please. Bruce, are you able to take us through that?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'll just note that everything on the action sheet has been updated and completed. So happy to take any questions.
Yeah, through you. The final item there about the corporate services to do further work around whether contract management solution could be combined with Project Apollo. There's other references to the contract management throughout the agenda today. How does that work sort of tie in with what we're going to be doing in the foreseeable future around contract management?
Yes, please.
Yeah, thanks, Steve, for that question. So you recall that we did an internal audit of our contract management. We found a number of opportunities for improvement. That work was then peer reviewed by PwC with a number of recommendations that validated our findings. And the team is currently putting together a work program for delivering improvements to the contract management system. And that's the total system, including any need for any software that may assist, which is just one of the elements of the overall improvement plan. So that's underway and will be actioned shortly.
Thank you.
Any other matters you would like to address in the action sheet? No? Thank you then, Bruce. Move then the Deloitte's engagement. Will be turning up later. It'll go to the end of business. We move then to the internal audit schedule and Mandy's paper. take the matter as read. Anybody like to move to accept?
Yep.
Thank you, Councillor Blackwell. Did I see the second hand there from the Chair? Thank you, Mr. Crawford. Any discussion before we move to accept the paper?
Nothing to go against Deloitte. I think we'd be struggling to come up with something. Simon would have picked it up anyway, I'm sure. Anything you're aware of, Simon? It's just that the bill goes up, as I see.
Oh, no, we're on, Deloitte's is coming in later on.
Oh, sorry.
We've gone to Mandy Tiffany's, the internal audit
Oh, sorry. Oh, wow.
schedule on page 41.
41, sorry.
But yes, you're quite right, the bill goes up. Yeah.
Good job.
Anything you need us to pay attention to in particular, Bruce? Would you like to highlight for us?
Let's highlight for your attention that we will be undertaking our fraud detection work towards the end of this year. It's planned for June 2025. And also some of the other elements there, including a review of our financial staff benefit policy and procurement management and a few other things. There's a fairly detailed schedule of internal audits plan coming up for the near future.
Yes, it's a huge amount of work in there.
I've just got one question around you, Bruce. Around is it item 4 of the audit of what you've done? The workload, completing priorities, ever increasing expectation. But when we read in your health and safety report about feeling of the workplace, it's very strong. Yet here it's still in the extreme and high level. How can we have 2 different references here?
Sorry, Jeff.
Oh,
Which page are you on?
I'm on page item 46.
6.
It's item 4. Where you go the risk assessment.
I see.
We got it rated 20 and a 12. It seems when you're still in the extreme level, but we've seen through our previous audits with health and safety about the workplace feelings, and it's increased a lot. We're still reporting as if we're in the extreme level of workplace.
We're actually in the high. So there was the inherent. What's the 20 is the inherent. And that's the extreme.
Down to 12.
And 12 is the high. So we have actually reduced that.
Okay.
You'll see that and we're actually on that next agenda item, but we have actually reduced that rating down after a review by management. So it has reduced you.
Okay. Yeah. That's good.
Mr. Chairman, are we going to deal with 6.3 or are we going to, or should we? Because I know we've let agenda items here.
Oh, excuse me. Well, let's move Amanda's report first, then go to 6.3.
Thank you.
So we have, Jeff, would you like to revise your seconding?
Yeah, okay. We're on to 6.3, are we?
No, but you were going to move 6.1
Yes.
when you seconded, but we're actually moving 6.2.
6.2, okay.
Yeah, the internal audit schedule.
Yeah, so we're coming back to 6.1.
Yeah. All those in favour of moving Amanda's report, please.
All right.
Aye.
Any against? Abstentions? Nil. Thank you. Komana. And now move to the item 6.2. Thank you. Which is the risk management activity update.
3.
3. Yeah, sorry. Jeff's made one comment. I have one that I declare a conflict of interest, I suppose, because Raft is one of my primary marae. And my question is, in respect of Kalerpa, how it remains static as a risk when the spread is increasing.
Well, I think, Chair, my response to that is that the inherent and residual risk both remain in extreme category 25. So whilst there's work going on, we still foresee that risk is extreme. And despite the still really good work that's going on, we are still seeing that spread, and we still consider that as an extreme risk. So,
Especially after the storm.
Okay, well, thank you. You've obviously considered it. That's my query answered.
Chair, if I can make a comment?
Yep.
So we did do a thorough review of all of these risks with the management team. And we've noted in the report that as a result of that, a number of these risks have been reduced in their rating, because previously we had applied, I think, a bit more of a extreme view to things, but we've moderated that now, and you'll notice a number of the risks have been reduced in their extremity, if you like. And some of those are actually being taken off as well as a result of developments and things happening.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
On the bottom of page 45, that's the very first risk, the changes in legislation and central government policy. We've sort of reduced from 16 to 12. Can we have a little bit more detail around that, please, Bruce? I mean, personally, I think some councillors also are concerned about changes in government policy impacting on us perhaps a little more heavily than what we've indicated here. Are we looking ahead, or basically are we saying that we don't know what's down the track? Do you allow me to that?
I think with any government, we see changes in position and policy that impact potentially on local government. We've seen it again in this current government setting. And we've noted there in terms of our controls, it's tracking what's happening in that space, being prepared and ready to respond. We do make submissions, to engage with central government, and noting also that we ensure our processes and policies are adaptable and flexible to respond.
I'm not so much worried about our ability to respond in terms of being able to make submissions and stuff. I'm worried about costs. I'm concerned about.
Yeah, no, I'd flag that point too, Jack. But it could go the other way. We've got on page 64, I think it's 0080. We're talking about that risk, but in actual fact, the government might take responsibilities away from us too, and it could go the other way. And we don't note that, if they do any restructuring of our responsibilities, such as the RMA and stuff like that, I don't know where it'll go, and maybe, but we should identify that it could swing the other way too.
Yeah.
So I guess what I'm really saying is, have ELT in its entirety and all the government staff had a really good input into assessing and reassessing these risks?
Yes, we have. We've had a complete review. So the leadership team gets updates on these risks quarterly.
Because I think things like inefficient contract management and stuff, I would have thought would be a much lower level of risk than what successive governments could do to us. But there we go. I'm prepared to take. I'm happy to take your staff's word for it. And also cyber attack. I think item 6, or risks number 6, cyber security attack. I would have thought that risk would have been higher, but are we confident that we've got enough procedures in place to prevent it? Because it's incredibly expensive and disruptive when they occur.
Well, we allocated national budget through the long-term planning process, so we have increased our provision for actually doing more work. And you'll note there that in terms of the cybersecurity assessment program, our score has increased from 37% to 50.5% over that 3-year period. So we are making some really good inroads and progress. And our systems are reasonably, they are well protected.
I noticed that there's internationally there's quite a lot of attacks occurring in the cloud now, which is supposed to be hack-free. But so, I mean, I'm sorry, I'm just a lay person. I have no real experience in this, but I do worry a lot about the huge increase in worldwide cyber crime, cyber attacks.
I think to provide you some assurance, I think now that we've just recently received that report on our cybersecurity position, I'd like us to present that to the next Audit and Risk Committee to show,
Thank you.
and confidential, of course, we don't want to put out what we're doing to the wider world, but where we're at and what we need to do to improve our posture. So if we could note that as an action to put on the next agenda, I'll bring that to the next meeting.
My experience is you can't prevent cyber attacks, but it's how to survive them. You need to put your effort. And if someone can build it, someone can pull it apart, essentially.
I've got one on 67 when you talk about carry dieback, and it worries me a wee bit because it's a real problem for North and Auckland North, I suppose. It's not a national problem like Kalupa might travel down. You just got to keep hammering these MPs, but probably not our MPs up here, but more our southern MPs because they probably, it's not their pets, not their problem, but it is a national problem, I believe, because it's such a national icon. And I'd hate to lose more than what he's lost now. It's not getting any better.
So,
Another one.
so just a question.
I agree.
on that.
John. No, you go.
Yeah. So what would happen in Northland if there was a genetically engineered solution to sorting out carry dieback?
What do you mean engineered?
If they could invent an antivirus of some sort to take the
Whatever,
fight off.
you know, because how's that? All our regional policies and stuff like that. Anti-GE.
Good point.
So it's done nationally, you know, which it would if you develop stuff like that.
I suspect it might come through the National Pest Threat Management Scheme, and it may be imposed upon us.
I don't have the information in front of me, Joey, to answer that question, but happy to note that and come back to you if you like.
Yeah, I'm not making an issue of it, but you know, it could be something's done nationally. It could be to do with possums or carry dieback.
I think the chances of a genetic GE solution for carry dieback would be much harder to find than it would be for possums, but it would be much easier to implement and to adopt, whereas possums are a Taonga in another country. And so this New Zealand signed up to the International Convention for the Protection of Biodiversity, and these GE solutions, one was found by Ag Research 20-something years ago, at 2003, 2004, and it was opposed by the Australian government because of the extremely high risk of some idiot taking it.
Is it the sterile gene?
It was sexually transmitted sterility years for possums, and so the chance of that having that rolled out were very low, but those risks weren't assessed. But carry dieback is nobody's friend, and I'd say that the chance of being able to implement a solution would be very high, but the chance of us finding one is very low because, and it's probably 20 to 30 to 40 years away because we just don't know enough about the disease at all. And we don't know hardly anything about its ecology. We know a bit about its DNA and how it behaves in New Zealand, but that's all. We don't even know exactly where in the world it comes from. So, yeah, but I take your point. I think it's a very good point, and it's something we should take into account when we we're going to be forced to confront our own policies on GE, which I think is your point, isn't it?
Prohibition is a pretty strong stance.
Yeah.
You know.
Well, I think we have to have a much more nuanced approach to GE than what we currently do.
Yeah.
I agree with you entirely, Joe. Thank you.
Sure.
Could I just mention something, please, Mr. Chair? Because I think there's two possible solutions that are being raised by Joe. One, of course, is genetically modified solutions, but then there is targeted medicine for plants. As we know right now, genetic research is very much the collection of data that is used to develop targeted medicine solutions for diseases amongst humans. But those are two specifically different fields of study. So whilst Jack is talking about genetic modified GMO solutions, I think that's quite different to targeted medicine. And my suggestion is if we are going to look at different options, that we keep our sights quite broad. The field of study, which is targeted medicine for plants, which is of course the equivalent for humans, is something that we might want to partner with universities or data scientists that are working in that field of study, and that might raise to our awareness the limited amount of resources and effort that are actually put into plant diseases like Cody dieback, and might also bring about some solutions that have not yet been thought about. I would suggest that there are funds available for that specific field of study if we were going to look at MB or the Ministry of Business and Innovation, who manage the funding streams for that specific type of scientific research. Kia ora.
Are you recommending then, do you have a recommendation to take up to council?
I'm not making a recommendation, I'm making a suggestion, which is that rather than just looking at GMO, that we also consider targeted medicine for plants, which is a different field of study. Kia ora.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion on the report?
I just like to note that I agree with the staff's estimate of the residual threat from gold clamp, second highest to second only to Kalupa. I think that staff have got this right on the button. We may be on the cusp of being able to protect Kaiwi Lakes, but we still leaves lots of other waterways in northern at extreme risk. And once it gets in here, we're done for. So yeah, I agree. The residual ranking would be easily be 15. Thank you.
Councillor.
There is pushback from Covey Lakes about the boat ramp being closed. And yeah, it might become a bit of an issue.
Oh,
Shame. Anyway, there's a deal with that.
How long is the closure, or under what conditions is the closure?
Yes.
It'll be permanent for any powerboat.
Until plans are
Yeah,
eradicated.
I don't think there's, well, that'd be true, but the eradication's very unlikely out of the Waikato. So, it's achieved it. So that's where people are really concerned about, people want to use the boat, Covey Lakes. And one strong argument is that why is it just powerboats? Why is it not sailing boats? You're only doing half the job. I think Colin will tell us that we have the powers to do that, but we probably mitigate it about 80% if we shut the boat ramp down. Powerboat.
Yeah.
That's information.
That's pretty good, really. But we've got this argument coming up tomorrow. Thank you.
Like if you can confine that argument to the Kaiwi Lakes District, the rest of us will be a bit happy about it. It's going to be difficult if it stays there.
Page 62.
Yep. So, do we have a mover for the report, please? Thank you, John. And second, thank you, Jack. All those in favour?
Aye.
And any against? Abstentions? No, thank you. Cool. Can we then move, please, to the fraud, corruption and dishonesty risk report, page 69. And the recommendation there is that we would receive the report. Take it as read again. Do we have a mover?
Happy to move that, Mr. Chair. Tēnā koe.
Te hoki rā koe ka. Tangata tautoko second. Thank you, Joe. Keep it in far north. Any discussion before we move to vote on? Yes.
Just a very minor one, Mr. Chairman. The graph on page 70 talks about fraud limitation. Is that actually just a, it's not a new word, is it? That's just a typo. Is it?
Ah, okay. I thought it was the beginning of fraud, like initiation, limitation.
Well, yeah, I was kind of hoping it would be, George, because I would have thought we could do better than just limit fraud. But anyway, that's just my thought.
Nice.
But it is called limitation, is it? Chris?
Yes,
It's
correct.
Yeah.
I would have thought prevention would have been a better word. Never mind, I'll let it go.
Yeah. Hard to prevent human nature, but you can limit its incursion. Yes. Yes.
Yeah, just above that, of course, we've got all staff and to sort of say, how much can we rely on the staff to report if there's fraud? I mean, is it 50%? Is it more than that? Because, we face these issues all the time. I think, not just council staff. So, you know, from my point of view, I'd like to see nil. And our history, I don't know what our history is, but do you expect all staff to report it? Would you get 80%? Would you get 100%? Would you get these?
Well, the policy says that you must report. It's mandatory. You know, fraud. Honestly, corruption, you must report it. We provide training to staff. How an individual reports things is up to an individual. So we provide all the right information, policy setting, guidance, training. But then what an individual chooses to do, it's up to that individual really.
So this applies to staff, but it should apply to councillors as
It
well.
applies to elected members, it applies to contractors, it applies to everybody that works for us.
Question, George.
Yes.
Just in terms of making the system fail safe, do we have like duplicate notification? For instance, the fraud limitation officer isn't the only person that's informed. Is that right? Is this, what I'm saying is if you've only got a very lineal sort of singularity about it, the chances are that person could be the one that's dishonest or fraudulent.
Well, there is an alternative. So if the fraud limitation officer is accused of fraud, then there's another mechanism to report through to another.
How do you know the fraud limitation officer isn't burying complaints or falsifying the responses? I'll give you an example. I previously worked for an organisation where the person in charge was the fraudulent person, and he designed a whole lot of new systems to make things more transparent and accountable, but it all came through him, and it was designed exactly for that purpose. And quite a few millions were discovered, but it took quite a long time before they were discovered and the person was dismissed.
But let's check in with Mandy. Can you recall, Mandy, is it dual reporting to myself and you?
And the CEO.
And-
So there's 3 channels there. So it's,
Thank you.
Sorry.
Question answered.
Generally, there's an escalation requirement in detection process. You must, I'm not sure about in this case, but
Thank you.
organisations I've been.
And, you know, I don't think, like, if you got a corrupt bugger, he's going to do everything to conceal, you know, what he's done, he should have done. So it's not even going to be picked up in this, you know, by its very nature, it's concealed so that you can't easily detect, and it's getting more and more complex now. It's the controls before they can do things that are
Tougher the systems, the lesser temptation.
yeah.
Peter?
Well, I've got one.
Yes, sir.
When I was on the board of trustees, the Department of Education were pretty tough on this. When the accounts were done, you know, it went through about 4 people before we paid on board. And we had a policy where we went through all the accounts, hopefully every month. So what that did was make sure that everyone knew we're doing it, and it kept everyone honest. But if we didn't keep an eye on the accounts and, you know, up and above what we had to do, I think it opens up the opportunity for someone to take. And I think this is a bit the same, isn't it? If you've got a good system here, you probably, unless you're very, very bright and cunning, you won't even try.
and just if I can comment, Chair, like we do run those fraud analytics, Simon, so which is like account match and GST numbers.
Oh, it goes to the company's office.
Very
Yes.
detailed.
And the banks are becoming more and more helpful, you know, the check payee details. And when you could change a bank account number and that wasn't associated with any particular name, the ASB has now put in a payee check where we notice their bank account number has changed, you know, we'll verify it. So there's those things working in the background as well.
Peter?
Kia ora, yeah, I know that we've considered AI solutions in the past. I would suggest that it would be it would be to our advantage to perhaps consider some fraud detection AI solutions, particularly in the area of things like public procurement. It gives an opportunity to look at how procurement is being monitored Also, social benefits might be another area that you might consider to monitor through fraud detection AI as a solution for local government. And I'd also suggest that tax and revenue collection and grant distribution are other areas that may well benefit from exploring what AI fraud detection solutions are available. But just making that suggestion as an alternative, because I understand that currently all our monitoring systems are human, and taking into account the comments around the table, it might be good to consider other options to support the way that we monitor those types of risks and detect any fraud. Kia ora.
Sure.
Yeah, George. So all our system is a staff-bound system. Got, you got a whistleblower and so forth. I just wonder whether there should be a process. Could be a member of the staff actually wants to go to someone political. They're invited to be able to go to the chair of this audit and risk, or the chair of the council. So it just gives them a totally non-staff avenue. Yes. If they know that process will be yeah.
Cheers. If I go to page 42, where they've got 2024-25, they've got fraud detection review, external provider to review NRC current processes. Doesn't that sort of address what we're talking about today?
I wasn't talking about process. I was talking about an actual incident. If someone said, I'm not suggesting there's a chance, or pretty low chance of it happening, but they could, a member of staff might feel they need to go out of the staff system.
I think this member of staff has got some information in that regards.
Kia ora, Chair. Just in response to that, we do in our policy provide opportunities for them to call Crime Stoppers. They don't want to go to the whistleblower, the CE, GM, corporate services. They can call Crime Stoppers and lodge their claim.
Okay, that's cool. That's a good idea.
Never heard of that.
Crime Stoppers.
Yeah.
Very honest man.
Is that a public office or a member, a division of the police, New Zealand Police Force?
I don't know what it is. No.
But
Police division.
I used them when I had the concern at a previous place of employment, and they put me straight through to fraud squad, because when I indicated the dollars, they put me straight in touch with the sergeant from the fraud squad. I mean, it went from there. It was really good.
Yeah.
Well, there you go.
Crime Stoppers, cool. There's a mechanism there. The problem with fraud, of course, it's difficult. It's easy to detect anomalies. It's difficult to prove the intent was actually fraudulent, unless you've got like that case last week, where the guy gave out $1 million worth of contracts to a non-existent business, and the other one, the wife supporting her husband's business.
Yeah, but the other case is down in Wellington at the dump.
Oh, I thought you meant Parliament.
Where the person who was monitoring, people come in and she didn't charge them. She just got free
yes,
beer.
you got the free beers.
Yeah.
$77,000 or $100,000 worth of business.
So we've got with roading,
Sorry, Joe?
with roading, you've had Auckland roading having quite a lot of problems, big figure stuff, and
I don't know if there's an AI.
really right across New Zealand, everywhere. I don't think with roading, with the NZTA, I don't think they've really got a system in place where
There's some feedback as well.
country. I think countries, we're talking about big vickies. For Northland over 3 years, it's a couple of billion. It's big stuff. And
Was that the one with the low-grade metal?
well, it could be lots of things, but one of the easiest ways to do it is look at your RAM database where it's indicating you should be spending money and verifying it against actual, and actually seeing if it's not matching up. If you see money going elsewhere, or if you see the RAM isn't representative, or money's being spent in areas where the RAM isn't indicating it, it should be an alarm bell system. And I believe that there's some inconsistencies like that in Northland at the moment. Everybody's silent on that one. It could be big money.
Well, I heard this morning they're announcing, is it $400 million for the rail improvements across the country? 200 for Metro. Yeah. So there will be some procurement we would anticipate in our region.
I think so, but each passing point.
It's not new, it's just upgrades.
It's upgrade. They finally do notification.
Okay, yes.
I'll give you, just a suggestion. The annual data analytics is undertaken by Deloitte, and I'm not sure if it's AI or how it works, but we give them files from our payroll system, we give them files from our accounts payable system. It runs that analytics program over it. It taps into the company's office, so you can see names of, say, an employee next to kin, and maybe they own an electrical company, and we've got another name here who's its wife who's raising purchase orders against that company, something like that. But I was just going to suggest that we could organise a 15-minute presentation from Deloitte to explain how their analytics system works. Has it got the backing of AI in there, or a portion of AI over the top of it? But it's just, they could come in, explain how it works, give you a little bit of confidence in what we're doing on an annual basis. If that's something you want me to organise, I would be just teleconference.
Yeah,
Teleconference.
that's our role to know.
Just to give you some comfort on what are they doing, and the quality of what they're doing to be.
I assume with so many receipts to cover, they would have to use AI in some form.
Yeah.
Just even to scan and receive the information. Otherwise, that bill would go way up.
It's about a $30,000 bill.
For the AI section alone on that analytics
On
data.
that analytics.
Okay.
Bring them in.
Just suggest, Chair, that we are very supportive of that. I'd like to understand a bit more as to how it works as well, but we could have them come to the next one of these meetings and do a presentation.
Even if we do it on the screen, because it will cost money.
So who takes that action? You, Simon? Thank you. All right, so that's that report done and dusted. Any further discussion? Thank you, Mandy. Is there anything you'd like to highlight for us before we finish?
No, thank you.
Bruce? No? Did we vote on that, Margaret? We took, no. Okay, all those in favour then of receiving the report?
Aye.
Thank you. Any against? No, thank you. Health and Safety Quarterly Report. We move to there, please. Page 75.
Happy to move, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jack. Support, second. Thank you, Councillor Crawford. Before we move to vote on it, take it as read. Any discussion from members in respect to the contents, please?
Quite nice comparing us with other councils.
Yeah.
Page 76. And if we ban driving, we'd be really good, wouldn't we? And the animals came up. I saw a horse in there somewhere. Struck. Dodged.
We're sort of over this because it sort of comes up in the CE's report each month anyways.
Nothing from you, Mandy. Bruce, nothing to highlight. Nothing from the councillors in respect to contents. No. Well, let's move through then. All those in favour of receiving the report?
Aye.
Thank you. Any against? No. Abstentions? None. Report is received. Thank you. Move then to item 6.6 on page 80, the insurance section. And Bruce has got an update. Most of you would have seen the email. Thank you, Bruce. I'll leave it to you. Thank you. That is the through your report.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, that email I sent out last night. Our insurers have provided us data on claims broken down into brackets of 5,000, below 10,000, and below 20,000. At the time of writing the report, we didn't have the information relating to any claims over 20,000. I went back to them and they got back to me just recently, on Friday, about a claim that we had that wasn't included in that table, and that was for a loss of our highlights, $42,000 within that reporting period of 2021 to 2024. And as a result of that, if you put that loss cost into that those claims categories, you'll note that the actual savings against the increase in premium, if you go to the cost below $20,000 column, if we increased our premium by excess to $20,000 limit, then we'd save $47,500 in premium savings. But based on the annualised loss, in the original report, I calculated that was $14,600 saving on annual per year. But if you actually bring in that other loss that the revised of late in the piece, that only results in an annualised saving of $4,000. So it's quite marginal on that. The windscreen cover figure stayed the same. So we save on that, 20 grand there. But they are quite marginal figures. And I have recommended that to the committee that they recommend to council to increase the commercial excess for motor to $20,000 and remove the windscreen and glass cover. The savings aren't huge, but they are savings. Pretty modest. Really want to take your advice as to whether you wish to support that recommendation, or are there other elements within this insurance report that you wish to question management on and ask any questions about any other opportunities for efficiencies?
Your data's only 3 years old, though. If we had 10 years of data, you know what I mean? Like it puts it out because it's a big lump in a short term. If we had a reference point over 10 years, it would be easy to figure out. Like, this is hard to reference in such a small period of time, whether you're savings or not. But, you know, NRC's been going for a long time. Be nice to, if there's any historical data that you can reflect back on and say, well, should over, this is only 3 years of questioning, or 4 years, maybe it was 10. Is there any of that data that you can reflect back on?
I can go back to the insurers and request up to 2017. I think that's as far back as they've got records for.
Okay, because that just puts it out on when you're looking at it at a small point.
Yeah, maybe to go back, because it's quite easy to get that information off them and then flick out an email to say, here's the data we've got up to 2017, here's the savings you could realise.
Because we will get random bits that have come out, but if it's only looking at it at the smallest period of time, it's actually going to put it out, even though that savings is still a savings, but if it was spread over longer, that's saving instead of being 4,000 might be.
There was one other loss that reported to me over $20,000, and I think it was $22,000 loss. That was maybe 6 or 7 years ago. So we've only had 2 of those kind of large losses in the fleet.
Vehicle crash.
Yeah, some vehicle crash thing. So.
Yes, John.
Yes, I wouldn't mind on that page 82, there probably should have been a third column, a fourth column, 20,000 and above. We've got one that you reported on. Going back to Jeff's comment, it'd be good to see how many of those big ones you've actually lost over the last decade. Windscreen's a funny one because it's one of the things we sort of quite enjoy having. It depends on your state of your road and what's happening on the roads. Because, in Darwin, when they're doing those main roads are straight, the windscreen people have a picnic. They flat out all the time. So I don't know. I know you got the data there. It looks like you can carry it. When you get a big enough fleet of vehicles or things you're insuring, yes, some religious people cover their own insurance. They don't have car insurance. So we're getting big enough to probably do it. Some things you can't afford to do without. Yesterday I had an example. We've got a wall shed, hydraulic wall press, and the lead caught fire. Threw the fuse out, luckily. But the shed went up. I think the new wall shed is probably $500,000, and I'll probably have to go cheap because probably wouldn't want to spend that much money. fortunately we've got it fixed, but the point was those things are insured because I can't afford to replace them. Where maybe some of my tractors, it's got like your fleet, I can probably afford to do with that one tractor. Wouldn't be the end of it. I've got more than one. Where with these fleets, if you give us 10 years of data, I would think we could carry quite a bit of the insurance. Yeah, so the windscreen, I mean, you got the data there. I always thought that was one of the big ones to keep there, but reading yours, yeah, you can probably afford to do without it.
Yeah.
As long as they fix it, as soon as it gets a crack, you can't get fixed, before it gets to be a problem.
And just when you look at the different premium options, I mean, they obviously have got good modelling because you're not winning, or you're just winning or losing. So you kind of go, do we tinker with this, or do we just stick with the current excess of $500 and keep the screen and just roll with it? And that may be a simpler approach. And we are a risk-adverse organisation, right? We don't go out there and be reckless. It is ratepayers' funds. So the committee could give direction to not proceed with this recommendation that I put in there and keep the current policy, and I'd be equally happy from a management perspective being risk averse. So, I mean, we can tinker with it like I've tried to do here, save a few bucks maybe lose a few bucks in a few years, or we keep the current setting in place and roll with that, noting that they won't give us third-party fire and theft either, because they've got a knock-to-knock agreement, which means that if we hit another car, then the other insurer pays for that car. So
We have to have that, don't we?
yeah, they won't give us just that as an option.
Yeah.
So
This is a surprise to me because I can get it.
Yeah.
yeah, you can get it as an individual, but
But I thought having your own private car, you probably look after it better because, you don't want to have a loss. Where if I've got a commercial council vehicle, I probably have a wee bit different view.
Well, that's what
Not you personally.
They agree with you.
That's my experience.
Take Bruce's point, are we quibbling over a few dollars and just get on with it? I think that's a valid point, Bruce. Sure the damn things. Don't be concerned about it. It's one less thing we need to worry about, whether we're winning or losing.
Yeah, and I agree with that approach. I'd be quite happy to, if the committee was of a mind to go get rid of recommendation 2 and 3, and then we keep our status quo, I'd be quite happy from a management perspective to roll with that as well. If that was the direction of the committee.
Because if you go with statistics as well, it's a matter of statistical kilometres that you will have another accident.
That's right.
So those are sort of statistics that people keep the data. So I'd be happy to change it.
So just move one.
Yeah.
Yes, if that's the case.
Yep.
Do we have a mover for recommendation 1 then?
Yep, move.
Those two, far end again.
Piece of light.
Councillor Crawford moved and Councillor Carr second. Thank you, Margaret. All those in favour of recommendation 1? Thank you. Any abstentions? Any against?
Thanks to the staff for all the work they put into it. Cheers.
Cool. What do you recommend that we do with recommendations 2 and 3 then, Bruce?
Just
Write them down.
Just let them lie on the table. Lie on the table.
while
Line
on the table,
Okay.
just
Excellent.
ignore them.
Well, there's a bit of a direction here that as Chair has said, get on with it. 10 years data would be nice, but you've only got data back to 2017. Doesn't sound like there's been a huge number of crashes in history that people can recommend, can relate to. So let's just. All right, very good. Thank you. Let's move then to the next item, which will be 6.8.
I'll move.
6.7 we're on.
Yes, but is Tucker available at this point? He was.
6.7.
And you wanting,
Sure.
Jonathan wanting to be
We can invite you.
Yeah. He's here.
Then my apologies, Tucker. We moved to your report 6.7.
And Jonathan Erickson's online.
Erickson said that's the other one. Yes.
I also sent an email. On that email I sent out last night, there was another item relating to the table 3 in this report, and a change to the existing table 3, where we've really recommended that under step 4, that the allocation of any remaining surplus be used to cover any shortfall in the MMH dividend of 25-26, or should that not eventuate or be needed, not required, then to pay down debt for the MMH transaction. So there's a slight change there between the table 3 in the report and the table I emailed out last night, wishing to replace that table in the report with the one in my email.
So that's under item 3.2.
Correct.
Yep. On page 88.
And that aligns with the financial report that's going to council.
Yep.
Say no.
We have discussion.
Yes, please.
Okay. I think it's, for me, I back the paying the just discussion about paying down the debt, taking on this MMH role. Our sales look like they're going to be a bit tough in this market. Bruce, is that correct? On a bit of a pause on the forest at the moment, with discussions with the local hapu, but even resolving that, my knowledge of forestry sales at the moment are very, very tough land sales. The other sales, I've talked to Phil Heatley, the town, and it's been reported in the news lately that things have come to a real tough row in Northland. And money's not about, so I think any money that will help pay debt, we've committed to 11 million, is that right, Bruce, to pay down within how many years of the taken over the...
Yeah, I think the proceeds for the sale is about 11 million.
Yeah, 11 million that we have to front up with. Now, what was our time zones around that? 11 million. Was it 3 years or something?
2 years. 3 was it?
3 years. Yeah, so that's what I remember, 3 years. So, this would be 1 million off the 11. Not quite 10%, but I'm just saying, we need to get going as well, because otherwise we're going to have to borrow again, and that would be a concern.
Yeah, and we're bringing that to the investment committee, so
Yeah,
you have an update there.
Yeah, so that's just my reasoning around, why I support that role.
So through the chair to Jeff, so you really want a recommendation of one only, just
Yes.
and just move in that direction.
Yep.
So it's recorded as a in the action sheet to carry through to.
Yeah, Chair, to replace that table in the report,
Yeah.
essentially. We
Yeah.
get a recommendation that the table that I emailed out
Yeah.
replaces table 3 in the report.
Yes, please.
Have that as a recommendation. Yep.
Oh,
And the mover for that recommendation, Jack can talk first.
Sorry?
Do you want to talk to the
No,
recommendation?
I just agree entirely with what Jeff and Bruce have come up with. It just seems like no brainer to replace that chart with a new chart. So, hey, got to get into the serious business of reducing debt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got 3 years, and it's going
Yeah.
to come upon us quite quickly.
So if you have a mover and a seconder for the first recommendation, and then we can ask for a mover and seconder for the new recommendation.
Okay, I'm doing it separately rather than
Well, because that's not, I think you have.
receive the report, then receive the amended part.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mark. Okay.
Okay.
I
Well,
made a suggestion, receive the report, then make the recommendation to replace the table.
so all in favour of receiving the report?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Good.
Got a move for that to
Yep.
receive the report. Thank you, Jack. And Joe, all those in favour? Good. All those against? Abstentions? No. Second recommendation then is to replace the table as per the email provided last night from Bruce. Jack, you moving that?
Yep.
Good. Second. Thank you, John. All those in favour?
Aye.
Cool. We have a new guest. Bruce, yep, very good. Okay, Dick, but yeah.
One question about that report, Claire. Going to move down there?
Yes, please.
Just wondered about that table 5, and you talk about rates, and you talk about sewers, and an increase of 0.2%, unexpected. That's pretty slow. I've been talking to chippies and bits and pieces. I gather not much is happening, but yet your sewers have gone up. So how does that work?
Sometime. Explain.
The soups has got, so it's from when we set the budget, the council or the district councils give us their soups then. And during the year, there might be subdivisions, for example, and we get more soups. And so our actuals reflect the growth from when we set the budget to when we're reporting that growth.
But that 0.2%, is that normal? Is it low? Is it high? Because I was wondering because.
Oh, that 0.2% is just the percentage of the rate increase over the total rates. It just, I think that's what it says 105, my eyes are so. And then there's a 0.2%. That's just what 100% represents as a percentage over the total rates budget in dollars.
I'd just like to know where the extra soups are coming from, that's all.
Oh, we can have a look. Yep, we can, I can.
Because going by some data we've had, it seems like Cobra's doing, pushing more than its own weight.
Yep, I can do that. I'll get you where the soups growth has been by district.
I figure that this area is not doing particularly well, in fact, probably negative, which is a bit of a concern. Especially when cooking crash. Thank you.
I can take that on, Chair. I'll get you an email of where the soup growth is per district, but it's got no real relevance to the 0.2.
Yep, I think
Just a bit talk, give us an update on the markets.
Yep, now, while it's available.
Yeah.
Yep. Look, we have guest Jonathan from Ericsson's. Rather than keep on waiting, one of you could move to his market update now. Members feel that's fine. Come back to our business teams. Kia ora, Jonathan.
Kia ora.
Welcome.
Thank you.
We're in your hands.
Great. Well, we're working very hard to get your 30th of April figures to you by the end of this week. But in the meantime, the markets went down in March and went down further after Liberation Day on the 2nd of April. But they've now more or less bounced back. And so the position is looking a lot better for your managed funds than it had. But obviously the geopolitical situation is still a bit vague. And the most interesting thing is actually the fact that 3 countries' election results have been affected by President Trump's tweets and just the way different countries' leaders have responded to them. So in that sense, the defensive position of your funds continues. There's only 2 areas which I wanted to address. The first one is that at the end of March, your exposure to private equity, including uncalled capital, was 36.5 as at %, and the cap is 35%. And as at the 30th of April, that had fallen to 36.2. But in the first couple of weeks of May, Continuity Capital Funds 2, 4, and 5 paid out substantial distributions. And there's actually a little bit more coming from Fund 6 before the 30th of June, so that we expect by the end of May that the 35% figure will be met, provided the other listed assets don't sell off again, because as I say, they've actually bounced back this month. So the other critical area is the 20% cap on Australian exposure. And as at the 30th of April, that's dropped back to 18.3% because the New Zealand dollar has actually depreciated again against the Australian. So in that sense, you're pretty much on target for the SIPO. And we're confident that provided the markets don't have another meltdown, the performance to the end of this financial year will be satisfactory. if not stellar. It was a superb calendar year, but this is a bit harder, of course, now that we've got President Trump actively talking the markets up and down and all around the place. Happy to take any questions, Chair.
Anybody? Yes, Joe.
Look, it's a bit of a personal question. I don't think it applies much to council, but why is New Zealand dollar losing value against Australia?
That's a superb question, Joe. It's not a personal one at all, because in theory, it should be losing a little bit of value because our cash rate is 3.5%. and the Australian one is 4.1, although the Australian dollar cash rate will actually go down probably by 25 bips this afternoon. So one sense there's the interest rate differential, but the main reason is the perceived strength of the Australian economy relative to the New Zealand economy, and the lack of support for the New Zealand dollar from offshore investors. So it's always both Australian dollar and New Zealand dollar are much more actively traded than the amount of the currencies in the market, because they both float freely, and to some extent they both get knocked around by what's happening to the US dollar. And at the moment, that's what's happening. The US dollar was weakening and then strengthened, and then when Moody's cut their AAA rating, it went down again, and that meant that the New Zealand and Australian dollars strengthened, but the Australian strengthened just a little bit more than the Kiwi. I think partly it's because of the fact that we actually had a recession because the cash rate got up to 5.5, whereas in Australia they kept the cash rate lower, and thus didn't damage property prices so much. So in that sense, it is a volatile situation, but it looks as though the Australian dollar will stay a bit stronger than the Kiwi, but both should appreciate against the US dollar at some point.
Thank you, Jonathan.
I got a question, Jonathan. The cash rate, do you see that it's still going to drop another 50 basis points by the end of the year?
Yes, in New Zealand, you mean, Jeff?
Yes.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. It could drop slightly more depending on what happens in the budget on Thursday, and who they appoint as the permanent governor of the Reserve Bank going forward.
Okay, knowing that the budget doesn't sound great for stimulus, what do you think that'll do for our dollar?
It should weaken it further.
Okay, which is good for exporters.
Yes.
And not for importers, yeah. How long do you think it'll take for us to get out of this debt, this heavy debt regime that the government's taking on?
That's a superb question, which I'm not qualified to answer. I think longer than they think. I think I think basically they say they're trying to reduce the debt burden, but it's a lot harder to do than they realise, I think. But in that sense, they are starting to tap into the New Zealand Super Fund to offset the cost of the old age pension from 2028. So that will make the numbers look better, because obviously that fund at 80 bill has got plenty of capacity to pay quite a few old age pensioners.
So they're taking 34 million out of that.
Yeah.
That's only just small change though out of that pension fund though, isn't it?
Yeah, at 0.4% in actual fact, and they're generating 10% per annum.
Yeah.
So, but effectively the New Zealand Super Fund is counted as an asset in the New Zealand Government Inc.'s books.
Oh, sort of offsetting our loan ratio.
Yes. Same with the GSF, annuitas, and to some extent ACC. The problem with ACC is they've got hard liabilities. You know, they have to value the long-term claims from ACC, and that offsets the value of the assets of that book. But effectively, these assets are Crown assets, and they reduce the impact on the debt.
You need the money. Yeah, the government came out yesterday and said that they might means test KiwiSaver. What's your feeling around that?
Yeah, well, they obviously aren't trying very hard to win the next election. I mean, it's peanuts. So, you know, if you're under 65 and you put in $1,040, you get 520 back as a co-contribution, right?
Yeah,
it's nothing, you know. All it'll mean is more people go on a contribution holiday.
what are the green shoots that you're seeing in your businesses that are starting to come forward, Jonathan, that we should be keeping an eye on?
Well, the private equity firms are very active getting involved in businesses, but it's the usual areas. It's food services, tech, and exports. But it's really tough out there, Jeff, as I'm sure you know. I know Northland's doing it harder than some other parts of the country, but it's hard mainly because the tourists haven't come back and we haven't got enough people to service the tourists that do come. And the hospitality and the retail sectors are still smashed.
Yeah. No, that's good. Sorry, I've taken all the question time.
Oh, that's good. Someone's asking them. Any further questions? We just received this report, don't we?
Yes, you bet you already done that.
What you've done. Okay. If there's no further questions, John, we thank you for your report and your care for SIPO. Just one little question. Emerged this morning news of the post-Brexit deal between Britain and the Europeans. Is there going to be comfort for people shifting investment from the States to Europe? Sounds like there's a little bit of comfort went to the Australians, but is Europe going to offer us some new frontiers?
Yeah, so I mean, part of what's happened as a result of the Trump tariffs is that quite a bit of investment has already moved from the US to Europe. And so this should strengthen that to a limited extent. But of course, the problem is that in the US, the growth rates are still higher than in Europe. So it will make a little bit of difference, but not a lot. I think the geopolitical risks are the key ones. But the big thing there, of course, is that the Germans have finally seen sense and started borrowing money for defence spending. And so that has actually boosted the European economy somewhat. But it's again, they're very slim green shoots. I think the key thing there is the increased mobility of people between countries, including Britain and the EU, will help a bit. But of course, that doesn't mean that Kiwis can go over there for long OEs as they used to be able to.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. Appreciate your time and wish you well for the rest of the day.
Great. Thanks a lot. And good luck with your deliberations.
Sure. Okay. Item 6.8. Regulatory Services Policy Report. Page 92. Collins Nolan, there's a floor to you, Bruce.
Sorry, Chair, I haven't seen Colin this morning. I'm going to speak to his report.
So get Trump.
Would you mind? So, thank you.
So Chair, I'll move the reports received.
And I'm happy to second that. Tēnā koe, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Margaret. Any discussion before we vote?
I just want.
You want to receive it and then wait for Colin and have a discussion?
Yeah.
Okay, all those in favour of receiving the report, please?
Aye.
Good.
Aye.
Any against? Morning, Marty. Okay. Is there any items people would like to discuss before Colin turns up? Hope he's well.
I've just received an email from Deanne apologising she can't make it today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got that. I've been in contact.
Thank you.
Family's unwell.
Well, it's been busy.
Yeah. Nobody on.
No. Jim, while we're waiting, I'm really pleased with getting these reports, and I like to think, I think it might have been Jeff's idea, whoever's idea it was, that we are provided with it, because it just gives us councillors a really good handle about exactly how much activity, we monitor and administer, and the range, and also a reasonably good idea about the kind of areas that cause us problems, environmental issues.
Yeah. Normally governance, you try and keep a high level, but at the Audit and Risk Committee, you need to see detail. There's a lot of assurance in reports of this content.
Yeah, it's a good place of public record too.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Interesting about air discharge, and we talk about smoke and how you're supposed to keep it in your boundaries. And in my area, we've had forestry come through, and they've done my place, and the neighbours, and all around me, and we're completely smoked in for the last week. No one's made any complaints. I was going to tell my neighbour maybe a couple extra barbed wires on the fence might help, but some of these rules are. Actually, I'm not sure what the rule is out in the country, but there's no way that you can contain your smoke.
But weren't you adding to it as well, John?
I was.
Well, you saw them doing it, so you got stuck in it as well.
You should burn all your silence track at the same time.
Stop trying to be the
All
dog.
right. Come on. What's such a large put up from a forestry point of view?
Oh, they're just shell belts and small fire blocks, but we had a dry period we couldn't burn, and then we had a hot spot and we had to go and burn. So everyone saw one fire and everyone jumped on the bandwagon. These forestry crews go through and do a pretty good job, but you've got to tidy up. Yep. But the rule is, I think you're supposed to keep the smoke within your boundary. Is that in the country? Is that?
Well, I think the rule is if it goes over 2 metres, you can't control it. So as long as you can control it within the 2 metre line.
The smoke?
Yeah, that's what I say. Well, who knows? I can't control it as soon as it goes above my head.
You can control it even below your head.
Yeah, you don't like it.
You got to have a response.
Are there, Mr. Chair, are there regulations regarding fires that our staff can advise if we are responsible for monitoring, and how we monitor them if we are, considering our environmental obligations and the place of different fires, considering risk and whatnot?
Got Collins here.
Collins, just come in.
My apologies, being late.
We can see you being busy.
Yeah.
Are you able to consider Councillor Jones's question around regulations that pertain to fire and how your team monitor those?
So the question is about fire risk.
Yes, I'm happy to just clarify. In so much as fires are concerned, and Northland Regional Council's obligation in where the environment is our focus, do we have a responsibility to monitor any regulations when we talk about fires being started, fires being managed on private property or on government land?
So our jurisdiction relates to the burning rules in our regional plan, and also the NES air quality. So there are certain materials that are prohibited from burning, which come under the NES, but also our plan. And there are also various rules that permit burning, but subject to conditions. So we tend to get more involved where there's smoke nuisance, but the actual, if you like, authorisation to light a fire or burn comes under PENS, because that's where they have fire permits and so forth, and restricted fire seasons. We're not responsible for monitoring those. Does that clarify the jurisdiction?
Yeah, it does somewhat clarify. There are instances where smaller rural residential properties might, burn rubbish or something like that. That is not a prohibited substance for burning. And then there's bigger sorts of fires. Is that something that is still within our jurisdiction, or does that cross over into district councils? And also, how do we understand the threshold for like air pollution when a small fire that someone might have in a drum, for example, is a nuisance or not?
Yeah. So with the smaller fires, which get captured by our rules, as I mentioned, there are certain conditions. So there's certain materials that you can burn, and there's materials you can't. And then if it's on a trade and an industrial premise, there are slightly different requirements. And if you're burning on a trade and an industrial premise or commercial premise, there's more stricter controls, and that includes about, if you like, the device you mentioned, drum. The drum itself, the old 44-gallon drum, or whatever they call them nowadays, is not necessarily accepted as an appropriate method of burning on an industrial and trade premise. Larger scale fires, if it's a natural fire, obviously we can't do much about. We don't have much jurisdiction in that regard.
Okay, so in rural residential properties, the 44-gallon drum is fine, just not in a commercial sense.
I'd have to double check that, but I'm happy to do that and follow up on that. But certainly it's not okay on a trade industrial premise. It needs to be properly designed.
Okay. Just thank you for that information and look forward to the follow-up information. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Kia ora.
I hope you're not talking about my mother-in-law burning while the washing's on the line next door.
No, this is just really about clarification and how we communicate with our ratepayers, because what's acceptable in the community and what rules we are imposing on people, considering the costs around working within the policies. How do we manage need and expectation within the community while still upholding our responsibilities to monitor any respective regulations? That's the essence of my question. Ora tātou.
So through the chair again, just given that further context, it's always been contentious, the backyard burning and so forth, and weighing up what are the alternatives, but it's also always been considered that it's more appropriate that you try to avoid burning. But of course, there is some challenges there in terms of people living away from green fields or refuse disposal facilities. So these matters have been canvassed and addressed for our various plans and you know, obviously the most recent plan, our recent proposed plan.
Thank you. Councillor,
Just to verify, the question I had earlier on before you came in the room, Colin, was about smoke and forestry burns and, you know, farmers burning their rubbish. And I understood that you're supposed to keep the smoke within your property. Now, that's an urban rule or?
Oh, so that's a rule in general that where we come into play is if there is deemed to be a nuisance beyond the boundary, that's not permitted by our rule.
So for me to comply, I should probably buy all of Kaipara because, I mean, some of these fires recently, you know, these nice still days, it's just been hanging around, you know, a huge area and all these farmers are burning a fire. If we actually abide by that rule, we wouldn't be allowed to have those fires, which are really important because I go back to the 1970s with the Auckland airport and farmers were not allowed to have fires, open fires because of the airport. So what happened is those farmers never planted any more trees. So you've got to be careful what your rules do. And I think Putakawas was another one where if they were within so many metres of the coastline, you weren't allowed to prune or touch them. That means people living near the coast didn't plant Putakawa trees. So you've got to be careful about these rules. And I think the smoke one with farmers, I mean, you want to encourage farmers, I think, to clean up that mess. You'll say you're burning carbon and actually they produced the tree in the first place. And in our case, a lot of that carbon's locked up because those trees have gone into buildings and all sorts of things. So we've got to be careful about the rules we place. Don't stop or cause another issue down the road we didn't expect.
Yeah, and that's really comes back to it with permitting burning some conditions.
Yeah.
And again, you'll be well aware that things like what we might view as common sense, for example, making sure you're burning dry material and that you're not burning when the wind's blowing right towards your neighbour, they're the sorts of things that we'd expect, you know, are reasonable controls and should be able to be followed. And often we sort of, particularly after periods when there's been a fire ban and get into autumn, winter, that's when obviously people are keen to do some burning, but again, it comes down to proper management of that burning to avoid burning things like green material or wet material. Yeah, so we try to find a middle ground through the rules.
Yeah, because if someone wanted to take me to task, they could have easily done it. If I'd fallen out with a few of my neighbours, I mean, it would have given them something to do, wouldn't it? Get you out here to check out on the smoke that's gone outside my boundary. So, you know, I worry about these rules and not really that practical somewhere. Thank you, Colin.
windless days would be another alternative.
But they've been for weeks.
Joe.
Yeah. I just, in respect to what's just been said, often the district doesn't look at its fire ban until it's too late and material's wet. And it's cost me $10,000 one year because I had to go through and line cut through all the stuff that would just gone woof. And yeah, it's quite hard. And if you get someone who's the district fire officer who's nuanced and understands the stuff, it works really well. Someone come in with a different perspective and you've got a problem. So it's quite. I remember doing the backyard burning policy hearings down in Whangarei, and one of the things that was really made strongly, because there's quite a lot of horticulture within the yearshed for Whangarei, is for reasons of preventing disease spread. They want to burn their trimmings, and you know it was just something that came out. There was an absolute need that had to be provided for, or else disease would spread through there.
Councillor Cook.
Different matter. Look, this is a table 3 in of the report. Applications more than 12 months old. It's a question for Colin. Look, feel free to say that you don't have an answer to this because we are doing. But there's 8 applications from FNDC that are older than 12 months. We don't seem to be That list doesn't seem to be getting any shorter. Do you think we're making progress? Well, I mean, there's about 5 of them that are wastewater, there's a sludge in stormwater. They're pretty big items.
So that's a good question. And when you say, are we making progress?
Are they making progress, I guess?
So we're actually, for example, recently with Kaikoura wastewater treatment plant, we basically said, no, we've given you ample time to, a lot of the delays because we're undertaking engagement with whether it's iwi hapu or the community in general.
Yep.
So that's reasonable, give them a little bit of opportunity there because they're in a rock and hard place. If they don't do it, then they get criticised. But then there's a limit to how much, if you like, latitude we can give. And so in the case of Kaikoura, that's gone, been around for a while. So we're basically requiring, we've said we've now publicly notified that, and that will proceed to a hearing. And that's our main lever now, is that we'll just say, we're giving you enough time, go into a hearing and take it from there.
I guess a subsidiary question to that is, nobody wins if we take them to court and get a big fine out of them. I mean, it just comes out of one ratepayer or another. I guess it's a question for the committee, really. Are we satisfied that we're doing everything we can to help them get where they need to be? I'm not talking about us changing our standards at all. I'm talking about other solutions. Are we talking about going to Wellington? Are we talking about, what's our history of applying to PGF and PIF for these kind of programs? It's substantial.
Yeah, so, well, and that's, we now just had we had the change in government, and that was the end of the pre-waters, if you like, regime under the previous government. So now we're back to, I won't quite say status quo, but we're still in the status quo at the moment. And we've always known that there's substantial cost involved in rectifying these issues. So you're right, there's you're almost like, makes our job difficult to try to force these matters. One thing that we have done, and we may well be looking at this again for the ongoing non-compliance issues, is where we take a harder line like an enforcement order, which goes through the court, and that means it's coming from a court and putting that emphasis back on the district councils to
address
the orders that are in the enforcement order, and that those orders can require upgrades.
So another question then is, do we have any history of where council itself or councillors or things like this get involved in decisions whether to make enforcement orders, or has that entirely been delegated and stays that way? Okay, I'm not going to argue with that then, that's fine.
Saying that, I mean, that is a course of action. It tends to be resource intensive and a cost, and generally speaking, we don't recover costs for enforcement orders, but that's, I'm happy to take that on board, that if there's support for harder action for the ones that have been problematic.
I'm not saying that because, Colin, I'm just introducing it as a possibility. But what I was thinking of, you've hinted at enforcement orders being useful, and that might force the district council to either take action or request some government assistance or something like that. I think Joe might have a view on some of it.
Yeah, with Kaikoura, for instance, there's been a huge expansion, and a lot of houses and units have been built in Kaikoura, hundreds, I'd say. And all you need to do is just say, look, these aren't adequately serviced, and object to the building permit. Just do it as simply as that. So the community actually is a bit more noisy about getting their sewage system improved.
I guess what I'm looking for is any appetite for us to investigate ways through this, because I mean, I guess ultimately it's a local water's done well argument, isn't it? And perhaps beyond us, but we have to be concerned with this because the standards aren't improving, are they? Generally, I mean, we're getting some programs and projects have been completed, but others are coming on the list. That list isn't getting any shorter. So, I mean, John, you've got ideas?
Only to add, I guess, through the chair, that we do advocate every single LTP. So Colin goes through detail and in detail goes through all of their budget lines to have a look and see, hey, look what you've talked about. Do you have budget for it? And Colin turns up at every single one of the district council's submissions to present that and to highlight whether they're putting their investments into the core infrastructure or whether the investments are put into other infrastructure and other activities across the region. And often he'll be highlighting that actually your budgets, you don't have sufficient budget invested in the Three Waters infrastructure. So we do advocate in that space every 3 years through their long-term plans. Also, we send a letter to their CE, the respective CEs every 6 months, roughly every 6 months as best we can, making sure that their chief executive knows for every single one of their wastewater plants what the status of it is, what our concerns and issues are, and what our expectations are. So that's another avenue that we use to make sure that their chief executive is well aware of how things are tracking for his council. I think one of the challenges is that they've had is A, been an underinvestment, B, there's been a lot of turnover of staff in some of those councils, and I think they've suffered, particularly the far north, in the high turnover of staff. But also I think the central government reforms that are taking place are overtaking any of these steps. We're not unique in this space. It's a countrywide issue around underinvestment in this infrastructure, and anything we might do in the interim is to continue to highlight it to the district councils, but it's that central government process that's underway at the moment that's really going to drive hopefully improvements in the Three Waters space.
So what I'm hearing, so through you, Mr. Chair, what I'm hearing is it wouldn't do the cause of water quality improvement any harm if we didn't take a slightly harder line. It might force some actions.
And just again through you, Mr. Chair, my observation is that Colin and the team are starting to take a harder line. You know, like yes, there's that challenge, and I heard it just before about taking money from rate, like district councils are ratepayer. So there's that to consider, but equally, and my observation is Colin and Stuart have been taking a harder line and forcing them to go to hearings, so it doesn't just drag out for a long period of time without them actually going, okay, then we actually need to front up and go, what are we actually going to do? Because quite often they'll be operating on an expired consent, and there'll be really, really long periods of time discussing as to what the options are for the next 20 odd years, and that's fine and appropriate, but also we have to draw it to a close at some point, and that's what Colin has done. I think you guys did it in Pai here.
Yeah, we did the enforcement order for Pai here, and just following what Jono said, just doing the recent letter to Far North. Last time we wrote, there were 6 abatement notices. This time there's 9. So 9. So current abatement notices. So yes, it's a matter of how much latitude sometimes we give, and it's a bit like Ahi Para. It took a bit of time, and I've got a new system up, but of course then it's going to take time to see if they actually meet the compliance standard because of the nature of the standard. So there's no, if you like, clear cut way. It's almost a case by case way we have to address these issues. But we're certainly we're highlighting again. There's some action that have been long standing that it's just gone on too long.
Yeah, but Chair, when you spend 25 million on aquatic sports centre over at Waipapa, call it aquatic because it'll flood, and you won't spend that money at Kaikoai on your sewage system, which has received sludge from all of the southern part of the Far North district, plus the district's solid waste was dumped within half a K of the main street on Recreation Avenue for many years. You know, if you try to find the rationality or the rationale for this, you struggle.
So Joe, are you suggesting that we should take the tougher line?
Oh, I think you could. I think you quite easily could do it. Is when they produce their annual plan and they're going to spend. And I've made that point. I've gone to submit it, and I said, "You've got this spend over here at Waipapa. Well, it should be put into your wastewater and Kaikohe." At point, but when they adopt their annual plan and it's got rubbish like that in it, this council could put an injunction on, say no. We could be bold and do it because it is really important. And I think you want to do something like that very sparingly, but we could do it.
What's your understanding of how that risk might reflect back on us, the lack of action that we got, Colin?
Well, that's somewhat of a loaded question, but yeah. So the risk, if you like, is I suppose political, as in your counterparts in the districts, and some community backlash of why are we, taking a harder line that's going to cost the ratepayer, or so that's the sort of thing we face. But again, I think we're on solid ground because of the latitude and the various correspondence over the years and action taken on these matters.
I think politically our risk to us is very low. I mean, we've heard from Jono that CE gets a letter every 6 months. They're getting plenty of notice. We're not only telling them what they have to do, we're allowing them to operate on expired consents. And you're going along to their LTP meetings telling them that they need to do this, and what they've put aside for it isn't enough or isn't anything. So, I mean, what more can we do to encourage them to take action? I'm lost for ideas, but I think Joe's got.
Well, what do we do to a poor old dairy farmer that's stored his wastewater for 3 months and has a big storm and then he starts having a bit of a messy operation? Yeah. Now we're talking about human pathogens.
Yeah, so letting council off the hook isn't working for anyone, is it? So, I mean, would it be good to have a report on the other suite of options? Maybe, I don't know.
I wonder if we include the most recent, so where Colin's just, as he said before, he's got a draft letter for FNDC in my inbox at the moment. The ones for KDC and WDC, I assume, Colin, aren't too far away. I wonder if we include these letters on our next audit and risk committee agenda, because Colin goes through with his staff quite a detailed analysis of each of the different ones and what their status is. So a lot more than what you see in here. And we can talk through there in a lot more granularity, I guess, as to what state they're all in. Also then, between now and then, Colin and I can also have a consideration of is like the only other step that we can take is actually taking them to court and getting an enforcement order, or actually drawing some of those matters to a close that have been operating on expired consents and actually drawing them to a hearing. Yeah, as I understand it, Colin.
Yeah, and just on that, in terms of enforcement action, say, for example, if we started to issue more infringement notices, which don't carry a big fine, that still doesn't actually address that issue, the outcome we're after. Without the outcome being properly operated, managed, and fit for purpose wastewater treatment systems with minimal negligible environmental impact. That's the outcome, and that's why taking more of an enforcement order approach, I think, is a reasonable option, because you're not prosecuting him, and even then, a prosecution doesn't necessarily resolve the issue. It might also result in an enforcement order. So an enforcement order may be a more appropriate course of action.
So, Chair?
Yes, sir.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but we could actually apply for resource consent for an appropriate wastewater treatment plant for Kaikohe ourselves. We don't have to even own the property. We could apply for it.
Well,
And that we could suggest a methodology that's practical, addresses the issues, and go to the Environment Court for resource consent. And yeah, then they'd have to consider whether they're going to actually take the opportunity using the resource consent that we've got.
yeah, probably has quite a interesting approach, Joe. I think.
Well, the other things aren't working.
Yeah, I think in that response, theoretically, under the Act,
We could.
any person, any legal, natural person or entity that's identified as a person under the Act, which includes body corps and so forth, could apply for a consent. But why would we do so? It's not part of our local government mandate to provide wastewater services. It's not, it's unheard of. So yeah, I'm not saying that it's a very novel approach, but our job's not to provide the infrastructure.
I know it's not, but we could get a consent and we could prove that it's reasonable and appropriate, all right, and for that particular setting. And it's where I struggle with Kaikohe is they're on a volcanic plateau and their staff tell them, oh, we can't discharge to land, and they try to put up on some pipe clay, and I just see this rubbish comes through from that organisation. There seems to be absolutely no will to discharge their treated effluent to anywhere but the Wairara stream. Right. And, well, if we've got that legal opportunity, I just think on just this one occasion, we should actually see if we're going to exercise the opportunity and do it. Because when it comes back to this council, our staff are going to go through any application. We've got the expertise within our organisation to actually make a really informed decision on the appropriateness of the application. So we actually know our business here. And because this has gone on. It's gone on. I was on that council in 2004, right? And about 2003 or something, they were granted a consent and they had to use UV disinfection.
Yep.
About 2005, they applied for and they got the consent. And all the people involved with the council like myself thought, well, it's good, we've got to set them on track. 2005, well, it might be even out to 2009, they did nothing. Then they applied for a variation that wasn't public notified to drop UV. By dropping UV, it meant all the things you needed for UV, like total suspended solids, was actually wiped. And Wairara is running exactly how it was in the early 2000s because this council gave them a variation. You know, it's just, we never get there with them. Yeah. So I'd like to see that, you know, is that we can have that as an action that we actually investigate that process I suggested. And boy, I tell you what, it might wake your ideas up.
Chair, just following on from Councillor Carr's kōrero, if we're going to have a paper at the next Audit and Risk Committee that has the letters and it has a discussion around options, this is just an option that we should include and consider. So we can have some discussion in the next paper on, like, I haven't heard of that one before, Joe, but it's worth us turning our mind to and bringing back some views on it. I don't have a response on right here, right now.
I know.
We can look into it.
I understand it's legal.
I'm sure it's legal. I guess, yeah.
Lawful.
Yeah.
I have a question for you though, John. I'll let Colin go first because I have another.
Just following what John has said. My gut feeling is that it's beyond our mandate. But obviously, in terms of the paper, we can get some legal advice to confirm that, because that is more of a question of law.
Yes, and similar to my question, is it within the terms of reference of the Audit and Risk Committee, or should that actually go direct to council?
We can come back with vote.
It's novel.
We can come back with option and then take it from there.
It's fine coming here because we do this standard reporting. And it's just it's an extension of that.
So the committee won't have delegation to be able to make a decision.
Yeah.
There's a combination of delegations that sit with Colin and decision making, depending on what option you might choose to proceed, that might sit at council. But the committee definitely has the regulatory services oversight as part of the committee's function. So we can come back and just like you do for other things where this committee can make recommendations to council if it's a function of council.
Because the other line of action occurs to me is investigating whether the Far North District Council have appropriately expended the grants they've received from the likes of the Infrastructure Acceleration Fund.
25 million.
A lot of money. Has it gone into Kaigwe, the wastewater treatment plant, which was supposed to be one of them?
Yes.
You can say no.
I'll be as careful as I can be. What you've explained there, George, to me is almost like a judicial review.
Yes,
And,
maybe beyond us.
I think we're treading on.
Why?
Well, that's fine. Isn't it?
I don't think it's our role to go to judicially review district councils. I think you'll.
Well, nothing's happening, is it?
Well, Mr. Chairman, I think John's suggestion is we have a report come back and we can consider options. One of the things you might want to consider, along the lines of Joe's, is we might consider, because we don't have the same level of debt as FNDC, they're pretty much capped out, aren't they? We don't. An option might be we might build facilities and then sell it back at an interest rate that doesn't disadvantage the regional rate payer.
I like it. Get a consent.
Yeah.
Say you guys aren't doing it, but we're prepared to build it. It's going to cost you. This is our policy. I think 6%, something like that, whatever our policy is.
It's infrastructure after all.
And just show them that we can actually turn this thing around in 12 months.
As I said, we can come back with some options there, but I think, as I said, it is some legal matters we need to address.
Just another question then, given that the Far North District Council has recently had submissions on its water management plans.
Okay.
So they've had two options. One was a regional approach, which I think was the recommended one from the central government. And they've gone for a contained approach within the Far North District Council. Tepeka, I think, is the name of it. Is there something that we need to, from the risk committee here, think about in respect of what that might create for further work for the council downstream?
So just to clarify, is that currently open for submission?
I think it closed the hearings last week, I think.
No.
They had public submissions last week. Yeah.
Again, I think in that regard, I can think of anything. I think we've lost any opportunity to submit on proposals. This is much more important. Again, I don't know what stuff we have to review anyways. That it just sitting. And it's again, local water's done well. It was meant to be local voice.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Before we go, then that's any items in your report that you think that we need to pay attention to or consider. And Councillor Robertson's got a question as well too, I guess. Just while you go there, we might take Councillor Robertson's question. Marty?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. agree with what Joe and Jack are suggesting. We'd put down the whip and pick up the tools and get in and help to achieve these objectives.
But is that part of our audit and risk to do that? Is that another committee?
Investment, I think eventually, Jeff.
Probably full committee. Yes.
Right with the report?
There's something I could bring up. In a previous report, Colin, there was a court case that had been with four defendants has now been removed and costs are going. Is that a risk to our council or not?
Normally we deal with that in the litigation report in committee.
Yeah, but it's going to come up probably next time.
Yeah, so I'm just getting some feedback because that's the case where the Crown took over.
Yes.
Our understanding, which I'm just getting confirmed, is that those applications would go to the Crown. And, they're the ones liable for the costs. I'm actually just clarifying that situation.
Okay.
And again, I do apologise for being late.
No, that's fine.
That was my effort. Worked out why.
Now moving to competence.
Right.
I'm going to do Deloitte's.
Yeah. Got to bring them in.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Colin.
If there's any further questions?
Just
Thank you, Colin. Thanks, Colin.
Everyone's very pleased with the report and the ability to look into your activities. Much appreciated.
Thanks for that. And
pass on the good work to the team too. They're doing good job. Keeping our economy moving, which is a critical part because we can't move without a consent.
Not under the new regime, Jeff.
You won't need one.
New regime, you won't need one.
Yeah.
So we're confident about the report back to the next committee. It's about scenarios and options. For
so it's options for addressing the overall issues. We can hear some novel approaches which we can address, and just again, it's a matter of giving the committee some time to consider and maybe identify preferred options.
And to make it easier on staff, we're only talking about one council here, aren't we? Not doing a lot.
Well,
I think you should be looking at them all.
Yeah, I think to be
only if you're happy to.
I mean, to be fair, there's still performance issues in other councils in terms of their pre-orders, not necessarily as many as the far north, but there's other issues in the Kaifra as well that are long-standing.
I'll ask him.
Thank you.
This
Mr.
very last page in our agenda, Scott. Six lines involving Northern Regional Council rivers.
That's in the confidential section.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. We'd like to move now. We've got
sorry.
Alex have joined us. Welcome, gentlemen.
Right now, everyone.
Yep.
Oh, there's more here, mate.
Comments report. We did.
No.
This one here. Yeah. So we received a report. Go back to item 6.1. Members of the committee. Do we have a mover? Thank you, Councillor Carr, Blackwell. The recommendation. All those in favour?
Aye.
And all those against? Any abstentions? None, thank you. Turn now then to yourself, Ms. Benny. Yep. We'll leave it in your hands to walk us through your report. Thank you.
Sure, happy to do so. Just to start off with, the purpose of the report is just to set out a high-level plan, in terms of, what the audit involves, the annual report. I always say there's a lot of information that goes into the annual report, a set of financial statements and a set of statement of service performance. We take a look at all of that. There's certain areas that are, for various reasons, either due to the quantum of it or the level of judgment involved, that we tend to spend quite a bit of more time on. And those are the ones that we call out in the report. So what I'll do is I'll take it as a read, and I'll just perhaps focus on that executive summary and just take the topics one by one, and then happy to take questions as we go along. The first area then, by the way, none of these have really changed from prior years, with a slight potential change on item 4 that I'll get to. But it's all about the asset valuations, really. As you know, council's required to follow the various reporting standards that require the assets to be carried at fair value. There's two sets of assets on the books. The rental investment properties, these are being revalued annually under the accounting rules. That involves a lot of judgment, lots of inputs that go into that, and actually striking the value that is appropriate for accounting purposes to be recognised. So that's the one part, and then there's the other infrastructural assets that's also carried at fair value, but it's not done on an annual basis under the accounting rules. It just needs to be done with sufficient regularity so that the market value is not materially different from what it's carried at in the books, but at least sort of once every 3 years, a class of assets needs to be revalued. So in that regard, we always, you get the valuations done. We take those valuations, we scrutinize them. We do have to do a lot of testing around, what's gone into that, the assumptions. We speak to the valuers if necessary. We look at the records surrounding those and how it's been reflected in the annual report and the financial statements. Those are very big numbers, and it's probably the biggest judgment call and estimate that the finance team has to make, or the council has to make, in terms of striking the accounting values for those. So our approach in that regard hasn't changed, and we'll be following the same sort of audit approach on that for this year. So I'll pause on that one if there's any questions on the asset valuations in particular. Otherwise, I'll just move on to the next bit.
Questions from members? I have one small question, thank you. Do you expect a large change of any sort with those valuations year to year?
Speaking purely based on what I've seen recently, I don't think the market is as fluid as it has been, or in previous years. Things have come back a bit in terms of the market itself, cost pressures, because a lot of those assets are actually revalued at a optimized depreciated replacement cost. So we're no longer seeing those sorts of pressures that we saw on construction costs if you think back 2-3 years ago. But yeah, the thing with the assets is a small change in a input extrapolated over a big asset base could have a material numerical impact, although it's might be a small percentage of the total asset base.
Thank you.
Yeah.
No further questions, Sam, if you'd like to move on.
Sure. All right, the next piece is around, obviously, the council has a big portfolio of investment assets spread across various fund investments. Because of the quantum of it, again, we do tend to focus a lot of time on that to make sure that it's been captured correctly. There's some very specific accounting rules as to how you record those, depending on what they are in the annual report. So again, some big numbers, some assumptions, and around valuations. We historically had the observation around controls reports not being available from certain investment managers. We'll be taking a close look at compliance with the CPO, the investment policy, and management of those investments. Hasn't been, apart from the observation that we had in the past around the control and controls reports, unless something significantly changes on that this year, the approach should be the same. Wouldn't expect any material issues on that either. Well, I'll just pause there if there's questions on that. Otherwise, I'll just carry on. All right. Okay. So the next piece, that's a mandatory piece. It's always there. It's around. So yes, we're auditors. Our primary focus is on, whether the accounts and the annual reports are a true and fair reflection, compliant with the accounting standards that you're supposed to follow. But we remain cognizant of the fact that, manipulation of the results that you see could occur through, fraud or manipulation by overriding the controls that are in place. So we approach that with some cognizant of that, and we design some specific procedures in response, particularly around the use of journal entries to manipulate numbers and records that you see in the financial statements. From a history, that's always been relatively clear. As soon as something does pop up, we'll report back on that. That's a mandatory focus area. The next piece around the investments in subsidiaries and associates, that's a lot of the pending transaction following the amendment to the LTP. And really, depending on what side of balance that transaction concludes, will depend on, what we need to do for this year's audit on that. If the transaction concludes prior to balance date, that makes for a fairly complicated set of consolidation, because you've got to basically deconsolidate the balance sheet, but you have a big part of the P&L from MMH still in the accounts. So there's quite a bit of accounting complexity to work through on that. If it's pre-balance date, because you have to adjust and prepare the accounts on that basis, and figure out how material, the stub period between, selling it and balance date is, all sorts of things. If it happens post-balance date, it's a non-adjusting event, and it's just disclosed as a subsequent event, and it doesn't go into the current year's accounts, and it becomes a 2026 matter. So depending on how that concludes, let's say it does conclude, we'll have to get into the detail of that, look at all the technicalities from the accounting right, and basically audit that transaction and the accounting treatment of that. That's why I added that piece in there for MMH. So, but happy to take questions on that.
Yeah. The obvious one is there's another council, Ports of Tauranga, and it'll affect them the same way, won't it? So we want to have the actual final wash up for the transaction after June 30th. Is that right?
I think we're intending to have the wash up this financial year.
This financial year. So it's going to make it complicated for Benny.
Okay. Well, complicated for Simon.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, and then the final focus area, that's so the OAG has certain specific focus areas, and we list them out in that particular slide. Some of them are more relevant than others to NRC, but the ones that we call out and we always do is around sensitive expenditure, like expense claims, entertainment expenditure and likes, where we take a look at, the policies that are in place. Have they been updated regularly in line with guidance? Do they follow best practice? And we also do some testing around the expenses that have been incurred in those areas, and then see whether that's gone through the necessary approval process. We sample some of that, and then see whether it complies. And again, we'll report back on the finding of that in our final report. So look, that's a high level over, and then finally, sorry, the statement of service performance. That's you've got the new LTP in place now. We do the standard audit testing around. We subject the whole thing to a full audit, as we're required to do. Where does the data come from? What's the control around capturing the data, making sure that it's complete, accurate, reliable, and does the actual statement of service performance and the story that's told around, the metrics compliant with the new the new standard that's come and play. I think it's last year already. That's never been a major issue either. It's just quite voluminous to work through. That's all. So I'll pause there. That's a high level overview of where we're going and the plan, in the absence of any other material scope changes or anything. But happy to take questions on that before I touch some of the other bits.
Any questions before we get to the curly ones?
Just to confirm, Chair, I just quickly chatted to Simon in response to Joe's question. We're prepared for for the transaction for MMH to conclude this financial year, and we're ready. Yes, it's more complex, but we're ready and prepared to be able to do that.
Right. I'm happy to take other questions. There's some information around new accounting standards or that have come into play from the 1st of January 2024. So it's just a heads up on that. I won't go into any. It's not overly exciting on that. We've issued our audit proposal letter, our engagement letter. It's all there. So happy to take questions.
No general questions for you, sir. Can we talk to you though about independence and fees section of the report?
Sure. Yep. I'll go to the page. Yep.
When you're ready.
Yep, I'm ready. Yep.
I'm just wondering, Benny, if you could provide the committee just to update us to the reasons just for the increase in the fees?
Yeah, so the way we got to the fee is we followed the same approach that we've done every year. So the budgeted audit hours, if we take out, let's assume the transaction doesn't conclude, ignore the hours associated with the transaction, right? The budgeted audit hours is exactly the same as it has been before. So we didn't increase that, right? So because we don't need to. And all we did was applied a CPI index to the wage CPI for professional services. To that, I think the number is 4.7%, which is the same as what's done across the board, and agreed with the OAG to that number. What we did factor into that number, and you'll see it in the APL letter, is if we do have to spend extra time on that transaction, which is quite complicated, there'll be a once-off 50-hour increase on that to go through all the technicalities, do the audit testing for that. So that'll be a once-off fee for this year, but it drops away into next year if it doesn't conclude in the current year. But other than that, it's simply the base fee, no increase in audit hours or audit effort on the base fee, just adjusted for that wage inflation.
Right. And the inclusion of Marsden Maritime, of course.
Yeah, well, where's the, let me just pull up the,
yeah, that's
yeah,
right.
yeah,
Me
yeah.
last year. Cool.
So it will be 208,500 if Marsden Maritime comes in.
You right, Simon? You okay with that?
Yes.
Good.
Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
All right. Well,
So the next steps are going back to your high level table on page at the beginning of your report.
Yep.
What do you need from us?
We need to get the engagement letter signed and the audit proposal letters that have been circulated signed and in place, and then we're ready to go.
Right, Simon's just given us the thumbs up on that. He said it's good. And the chair is nodding as well. Okay, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thank you, everyone.
Appreciate it.
Thanks all.
Yeah.
Brilliant.
Thank you. All right.
Thanks, Lee.
Do that. Bye.
Did we vote on that recommendation? No.
Yes, you were, no, you didn't. Just received the report. You had a mover and a seconder. And that was it.
So we've got the report. We've had a discussion on it. All those in favour of receiving it?
Aye.
Thank you. Any persons against? Any abstentions? No, thank you. Right, well, on. Proceed. We now proceed with item 7.1 and 7.2, business with the public excluded.
I move that we go into
So we need to move.
item 7. I move that we go into confidence, which is called, go into confidence.